Oh, I know a lot of appraisers out there are, a little slower than they've been, probably compared to the last many, many years, but certainly over the last couple of years. I think that's a fair statement. Most of the appraisers I speak to across the country have slowed down a bit. And I've been teaching a course called Diversifying Your Practice for a while. And it's so funny because at the beginning of that curriculum, I say, what are you going to do if you're a mortgage person? You do refinances and purchase transactions. What are you going to do if or when the interest rates go up? And that was part of one of the introductory slides. And I guess I had a premonition or something that, gosh, this is going to happen, because I wrote that course a while back. But now appraisers are scrambling, trying to do other things, and we're not insulated to that. We have historically tried to diversify. I do 5 different things. I wear 5 different hats, and I've done that for many, 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 many years. And the nice thing is that if something slows down over here in one of those 5 entities, hopefully the other ones are staying afloat or still doing well. A great example of that was COVID. My live classes went down to pretty much 0 during COVID. So thank goodness I do appraisal work and do some consulting and do some other things, a little bit of real estate here and there. But we talk about what can appraisers do to kind of diversify their practice, do different things. And I'll tell you, many years ago, I got into doing a little bit of litigation stuff because I found out that nobody wanted to do that kind of work. And if you jump into an area where no one wants to do it, then you probably have lots of opportunity. And if you enjoy what you're doing, and I enjoy that kind of work, the doors of opportunity open. Now we have paused that over the last few years because I'm involved in various things. I'm president of the National Association of Appraisers, and if I've got to be somewhere under that leadership role and a judge wants me in court, I can't say, well, Judge, I can't make it that day because I've got to come in. Judge won't care. So we have not aggressively pursued that work. I've never stopped doing that work, but we're about to hit the gas pedal now instead of the brakes because my service as president will be coming to an end over the next several months, and I won't have that conflict, right? I'll be able to attend. If you're the least bit interested in that type of work, come back and listen to the rest of this podcast. I've got a special guest I'm going to introduce you to in a moment who specializes in the world of litigation appraising and litigation support. You're not going to want to miss this one. Come on back. Hi, this is Bryan Reynolds. You're listening to the Appraisal Update podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Reynolds, and I'm glad you're here. I hope you're doing well. I have a special guest, met recently, and he specializes in this type of work. Please welcome Mr. Rick Bass. He's an MAI. He's a certified general appraiser in Florida, I believe, right, Rick? Is that where you're located?
Great.
Great. So, Rick, tell my audience, I said you specialize in litigation work, but tell my listeners a little bit about Rick Bass.
Well, for 36 years, I ran a little boutique appraisal firm with 5 appraisers. We were consulting appraisers, planners, and economists. 2016, I wanted to start an X strategy, so my key man, Bob Fletcher, he's also an MAI, an AICP, and a CCIM. So I ended up selling the firm to him. And so now I'm a 1099 of that firm, still working on litigation cases that we had back in 16.
Wow. So your exit strategy of retiring, you're still working, right?
Yeah. But I don't have the headache of running a firm anymore.
Yeah. I think about that often because I'll never discourage anyone from doing what I've done. I mean, I think that would be a little hypocritical. Don't go start your own firm. Just work for me, right? So I'm not going to discourage anyone from doing that. That's the American dream. But man, it's a lot of work, isn't it, Rick? I mean, it's a lot of work running a business, especially when you have employees or others relying on you.
Well, yeah, you're responsible for these people.
Right, right.
To keep the food coming in, and that's a lot of pressure and all the regulatory requirements we have to go through to keep a business open.
Yeah, yeah. I think my exit strategy might end up being similar to yours. I'll do something and then maybe go work for somebody else. I might like being an employee again myself. So hopefully I'm a few years off from that. I've still got lots of energy, and I don't have lots of energy. I'm like that Toby Keith song. I've got one. I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm good once. I got one good one in me. So that's a little bit about me. So tell my listeners, how did you get involved in the litigation support or litigation appraising? I mean, did you make a decision and start down that path early on, or did you fall into it? How did you get into that area of practice?
I basically fell into it, and when I was younger, I thought I wanted to be a court reporter, so I went to court reporting school. Didn't end up becoming a court reporter, but did move from my hometown of Miami to Eugene, Oregon, and became a court recorder for the Lane County District Court. So my job as a court recorder was also to take care of juries. So I would sit through trials and I would log in all the key factors that went on in the trial. So if it was appealed, the appeals court would go to the tape where it was logged in. So what I learned there was how to testify, watching professionals testify. A degree in urban planning and environmental management, but I couldn't get a job in Oregon. So I came back to Florida. I got a job with a consulting firm here in Sarasota, consulting planners and economists. So I started writing zoning codes and comprehensive plans and processing special exceptions, and appearing in front of city commissions and county commissions. And so when you're testifying, for a case or for a rezone or for a zoning code that you drafted, you're getting questions from those city or county commissioners, and they're not following any pattern. Commissioner 1 will ask this question, Commissioner 2 will ask this question. So you need to be able to stand up in front of that audience, in front of the commission and the public, and defend the code that you've drafted for them, or the rezoning petition you're processing for them. So that helped me become a good stand-up testifying person, just that experience. And the firm that I worked for at that time, as a planners and economists, we got a job with the Florida Department of Transportation for the right-of-way of I-75. We were doing the planning analysis for working with the appraisers. So my stepfather is an MAI, or was an MAI. We're working with these appraisers, doing the planning studies, feeding it to them. And I went, wait a second. I can plan it, I can zone it, I can do the economic analysis, but I can't value it. So I went, I'm going to start valuing. So I got my license, and once I did that, I got my own office. And
Very
because
cool.
I knew a lot of attorneys in the planning and zoning arena, they hired me to do condemnation cases. Now, I was not an MAI. And back in the day, if you didn't have an MAI, you didn't work for a bank. So that's how I got into appraising for litigation purposes, because I had ability to stand up and testify, take a position, defend it.
So let's break that down a minute, because I had somebody in my class the other day, and the question was, and we'll come back full circle and ask you this question, but this young lady was like, how do I get started in this? I really don't have experience. And we'll come back to that question, because I'll share with my listeners what I said, and then I'm curious to know your take on that as well. But what I really want to know from you is, what makes an effective witness, right? What makes an effective witness to the point where the attorney is going to call you and say, hey, I want to use you, right? What makes an effective witness in front of a judge or a jury or whoever the trier of fact is? I mean, it may be a planning commission, right? Or a regulatory board or a zoning board. That could be the trier of fact, right?
Correct.
What would be your response to the question, what makes an effective witness?
You have to believe in what you've done. You have to believe in that opinion that you've developed. You have to be able to defend that opinion. If you're wrong, if you're sitting on in the hot seat next to the judge, and the attorney points out you made an error, man, just admit it right then and there. Let your other attorney come back and say, does that really impact your opinion of value?
Right.
If you don't believe it, a jury's going to look you in the eye. And if you don't look a jury in the eye or the judge in the eye, they're not going to believe you. They look at body language. They look at all these features. It's an innate in all of us. Because and everybody knows, you can be at a dinner, at a bar, and you can tell somebody's just lying through their teeth.
Yeah.
Well, they can see that in you sitting at that bench.
So would it be fair to say, and we certainly don't want to make a mockery of a court or take it lightly, because these are real people, and it's their real lives that may be impacted with what you say in that hot seat. So we don't want to make a joke of it, but to some degree, it's kind of like a game. There's some cat and mouse there, give and take, and it's almost like you're giving a performance, not a fake performance, but a performance in that you're telling a story. You're telling the story of why you believe a property is worth this, how you arrived at that opinion, what might affect the value, and it really comes down to who can really articulate that and tell a better story. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. And again, you have to believe in what you've done, because innately, if you don't believe it, it's going to show. It's going to show in your facial expression, in your eyes. You're taking too long to answer a question. You're looking up to get the answer. No, you be able to look them in the eye. Here's the answer. Here's why.
Yeah. And one thing that I coach people on quite a bit is don't guess. If you don't know the answer, it's okay to say, absolutely, I don't know, or I don't recall, or I don't remember, or I haven't studied this and I can't answer that question, right? Those are all okay statements. Yeah, so it's real important just to, tell the truth, but if you don't know the answer, say I don't know. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. You'll give yourself away. So just if you don't know the answer, say I don't know.
Yeah.
Did I consider that? No, I didn't consider that. It wasn't relevant for my opinion.
What's harder in your mind as an expert witness? Somebody in the hot seat. If the trier of fact is a singular judge, or if it's a jury trial.
Singular judges are individuals too. I've appeared in judges who never look at you. They're at their desk and they're looking at a computer, but they don't look down at you. But one of the things you learn is, the attorney asks you a question, you turn to the trier of fact, whether it's the jury or whether it's the judge, and you talk to them, whether they look at you or not. And it's very disconcerting to talk to somebody who doesn't look at you.
Right.
But they are looking at you, you just don't realize it.
Right. I learned that a long time ago myself, Rick, is that I said a moment ago, you're telling a story. You're telling a story, but you should be telling that story and communicating that story to the trier of fact. So if it's a jury trial, look at the jury. You can receive the question from the attorney, but look at the jury, look at the judge. That's very important. Now, what happens sometimes is an astute attorney will try to stand in between you and the jury so that they can't see you, And that's why when I said earlier, it's kind of a game. Some attorneys will do that, and they're trying to, get you. The witness needs to understand that the sole mission of a cross-examining attorney is to make you look bad, is to discredit you.
Absolutely.
And you've got to keep that in your mind. They're not your friend. Even if they say, Mr. Bass, is it all right if I call you Rick? I've just insulted him. I've just tried to let everyone in the room know I don't even think of him as an expert. I'm just going to call him by his first name. But I did that in such a nice manner. I want you to feel comfortable. We just want you to tell the truth here. The jury's going to make a decision. The other attorney's going to ask you some questions. Can I get you a glass of water? Are you comfortable? Is it all right if I call you Rick? Say no. I will refer to you as Mr. Attorney, and I would appreciate it if you refer to me as Mr. Reynolds, right? So there's go ahead.
Don't be a wise guy on the stand.
Right. Yeah, you got to be careful with that because when you say they'll see through you, they'll pick up on that arrogance as well, and
Absolutely.
that will not bode well. The one thing that I've done is I try to make sure I communicate at a very basic level. You got to understand, that we understand valuation stuff, but the jury or judge may not. And so we really need to not talk in appraiser lingo the whole time we're up there, because that can kind of get you in trouble too.
Terminology. As an example, I want to know in eminent domain cases, you have 12 jurors. Other cases are 6. I want what the jurors are. Which one's the homemaker? Which one's the retired engineer? Which one's the retired math teacher? Which one's the contractor? Whatever they are. So depending upon the questions that's asked, I want to look at the juror is going to get that the best. The very question, I want to talk to the engineer. It's a common sense question. I want to talk to the housewife who hasn't been to work for 15 years but has raised 4 kids. And put it into an answer that she can understand.
Yeah, I've done that. I've done that with clients before. I had a gentleman call and wasn't happy with my appraisal, and what I ended up doing is saying, well, what is it you do for a living? You're a school teacher, right? And I gave an analogy as you're a teacher and you give your kids an assignment and they come back, how would you handle that, right? And so that works really, really well. Now, Rick, do you mostly do condemnation work, or do you do like a divorce transaction or construction defects or anything like that?
We do them all. I've done them all. Construction defects, mold, other hazardous contamination, working on a Superfund site on the East Coast. Unusual valuation assignments. We had one in Alaska. Well, at the time there were only 2 condominium developments in the entire state of Alaska, and this was the 3rd one that went south in 2006, 2007, and they didn't know how to value the remaining land that's approved for 36 units. Only 14 were built. What's the value of the remaining land? So they brought us in.
What's the longest case you've worked on?
One I'm still working on now, it's a Superfund site on the East Coast. It's been 4 years.
4 years. You've been working on the same assignment, same case for 4 years.
Originally, I was headhunted for the job for my planning background, because an issue was what were the market conditions for due diligence back in 1976. Was environmental contamination an issue in 1976? Well, the answer was no. Environmental issues were not an issue until after 1977, which was the Love Canal. And then, because I did that work, they asked me, well, can you appraise the property with and without the environmental contamination? And then we've updated it year after year after year as the negotiations have been ongoing with the appropriate federal agencies.
Very nice. Yeah, you probably hope that goes another 4 years or so, right? I mean,
just 3. I want to retire at 75.
Oh, you want to be done in 3. Okay. All right. I get it. Have you ever worked, and I'm just curious because I've had a couple of calls recently, quite frankly. Have you ever been asked to be involved in a nuisance complaint or nuisance case where the basis of the nuisance was noise?
Yes.
Okay, great. Was that like a highway, interstate, freeway, something like that, or was it a racetrack, or what was it?
Gun range.
A gun range.
Charlotte County gun range. Well, when they built that gun range back in the late 1970s, they were in the boondocks. During the big boom of 2003 to 2006, why the county planning department allowed them to put a residential subdivision around the gun range. So the issue wasn't necessarily noise, it was trespass of bullets.
Oh man, yeah.
Who went over the boundary and would land in the streets, in the houses, and so there was a lawsuit to rectify that problem.
Wow.
So we did all types of diminution in value projects. One of the things you raised earlier was how do you get into this business of testifying? And I suggest to any appraiser, if you do any work for a law firm, just the residential division, see if they have a divorce division. Get an introduction to that attorney. Most divorces do not go to trial. Most divorces do not end up having a deposition. But that's how you get started. If you're in a growth community where there are rezonings going on or comp plan amendments going on, where neighbors come out and say, if you approve this, you're going to damage the value of my property, then what you're going to be doing is what is called a proximity study. Does this land use negatively impact another land use? Does a large lot development that's historically there, and now you're getting subdivided into smaller lots, does that impact the large lot development value? Well, the answer is no. We've done proximity studies for proposed solid waste sanitary 1 class landfills. They're not hard to do, folks.
Yeah.
Like it's going find an existing landfill, look at the residential values near it, like kind subdivision removed from it. Is there a difference in value that you can isolate to that landfill?
So one of the things that I talk about frequently, and I've talked about this for many years. You know, if I'll be teaching a class, so I'll have 40 people in the room, and I'll say, raise your hand if you're an appraiser that does refinance or purchase transaction, and almost every hand goes up in the room, Rick. Almost every hand. And I say, keep your hand up. Now, all of you turn around and look. That's your competition. All right, put your hands down. I've got a nasty divorce going. I mean, nasty. The attorney for the husband's already, got their expert witness. We're looking for the attorney for the wife's looking for an expert, but the other side, they've brought in 3 attorneys. I mean, 1 from New York, 2 from Chicago. This is going to be nasty, and you better be ready because they're really gonna try and rip you over the coals as an expert witness. Who wants that job? And not a single hand goes up. Rick will take it. I'll take it. But no hands go up. Maybe every once in a while, Rick, a hand will go up, and I'll say, okay, look, I've interviewed 40 folks. 1 will take it. I'm stuck with this person. What can they charge me? And the answer is you can charge about whatever you want because there's such a scarcity, right? Such a scarcity of professionals that will take that kind of work. So if you're a listener right now, think about becoming that expert. It's fantastic work. And listen to me, it's interest rate safe because people are going to continue to get divorced no matter what the interest rates are.
Right.
People are going to die no matter what their interest rates are. We're doing a lot of estate stuff right now. I just took another one. There's going to continue to be construction defects. They're going to build and widen roads, condemnation work, like Rick's been talking about. This stuff is interest rate safe, and it's something that you should really think about. Now, we're running out of time, but Rick, a couple of more questions. Let's say that we have somebody listening right now, and they say, this kind of intrigues me. I'm really interested in the analytics and solving the problem, and what Rick just talked about for a proximity study or feasibility study, or some of these things really intrigue me, but oh my God, I wouldn't want to sit in the hot seat, right? Is there any opportunities at all where someone might be a litigation support specialist, but not have to worry about actually becoming the expert witness and sitting in the hot seat? Is there instances where you think of somebody could lend support without, because let's just face it, some people are fine at public speaking and some people aren't.
Right.
And if you want to try and get better, there's ways to try to improve. But I know there's some of my listeners right now, Rick, that are like 100% never, right? I don't want to do that, but I am interested. If I could work behind the scenes, I might be interested in that. Are you aware of any opportunities in this arena that might afford them that opportunity?
Very few, and they would be very, very high-end cases. So everybody don't want to spend the money.
Yeah.
They don't realize the benefit that we could bring to the table. And I've tried to convince the lawyers that I work with, if you don't want to hire me to do it, hire me to sit with you. Hire me to be the advocate for your case. Let me develop the questions for that appraiser.
Yeah.
That kind of.
Yeah, I've ran into that wall too, and I don't understand why. I mean, if it's money, I get it. Their thought process is, well, why am I going to hire Rick to be the expert, and I'm going to hire Bryan to be the litigation support specialist? Why am I paying for two? Right. But you really need to pay for two, because while Rick's in the hot seat testifying, he can't say, "Oh, attorney, ask me this question." And as a litigation support specialist, I could lean right over and say, "Oh, you need to cross-examination is killing him. You need to redeem him, and in your redirect, these are the questions you need to ask him to resurrect him, right? Because they're killing him." You can't tell them what to ask you when you're in the hot seat.
No, you got to tell them that before.
Yeah, and you got to hopefully predict everything you need. What I do a lot is say, ask some open-ended questions, right? So that now cross-examination doesn't want to ask me open-ended questions. They learn that real quick, but your own attorney can.
Well, I think most people get upset don't want to do litigation, not so much for the actual testimony, but it's the depositions where they really come after you, where they're really nasty. That scares them off. The actual trial testimony, the court's going to maintain some order there. So that's what I found anyway.
Yeah, and again, as you said a moment ago, most cases settle. I think the statistic is like 95% of cases settle. So you're rarely going to end up in that hot seat, but you could. And to your point, a deposition can be. I just enjoy it. Maybe I guess I'm weird. I enjoy that kind of work. Let me ask you this. In most of the cases you've dealt with, now I know you've done a lot of condemnation work, and generally they have an attorney that does condemnation work, so they know a little bit. But let's just say, think back to the run-of-the-mill divorce case. They're hiring their family attorney to represent them in the divorce case. Should the practicing appraiser out there that has some experience, they know what they're doing, they're confident in their ability, should they be intimidated by these attorneys? I mean, I found most attorneys know the law, but they really don't understand what you and I do.
They don't. And you have to educate most attorneys you have to educate on what you're doing and why you're doing it that way. And don't ask me a dumb question.
Yeah.
I go through a process where I draft my own questions and answers. You want to use them? Great, but this is what I know.
Yeah. I always tell the attorney, I say, look, I'm not going to rejoice in your victory. You're running the show, right? While I'm in the hot seat, I can't tell you, ask me this, dummy, right? I'm already in the hot seat. So I'm not gonna rejoice in your victory, but I'm also not gonna share in your defeat. You know, you're the one running this show. And if you don't ask me the questions that let me tell the story and tell the story effectively, then it's your fault. It's not my fault. It's your fault. You're the one running this show. And that's where, you know, pre-hearing conferences can be really vital so that, you know, that you make sure that you and your attorney are on the same, I don't want to say team, because again, as the appraiser expert, you are independent and unbiased. You're not an advocate. But at least that you're communicating and you know what to expect, at least from the attorney you're working for. I know I try and meet with new attorneys in advance, Rick, and they think they're interviewing me, and they probably are. But guess what? I'm interviewing them too, because there are some attorneys I will not work with. And I think it's important for the appraiser to make sure they get linked up with an attorney that they can work well with, and that the attorney respects them as the expert, because the appraiser is the expert.
Right.
Real quickly, if someone listening real quick wanted to reach out to you and pick your brain a little bit, do you have an email or something you'd mind sharing so they could give you a call or an email?
Sure. It's Rick Bass, but I spell Rick R-I-K. So it's Rick R-I-K Bass B-A-S-S at Comcast.net.
Great. Well, I appreciate you being here today. Again, if somebody wanted to dip their toe in the water, you're recommending they seek out an attorney and maybe see if they have a family court divorce section, right? Was that your recommendation?
Yes, on our construction defect segment.
Yeah.
And the thing about the house, you can appraise the defect of that house.
Absolutely. Well, Rick, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy. You got a lot of cases you're working on. And
I'm only a little bit.
Okay. You're very selective on what you take right now, right?
Tired.
I understand. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching the Appraisal Update podcast on YouTube if you're watching. Otherwise, you're listening on whatever your choice for the podcast is. Thank you very much for listening in today. If you need some education, jump over to appraisereLearning.com and check us out. By the way, Hal and an attorney or two is working on some specialized litigation courses for us. So we will have those available in the very near future over at Appraiser eLearning. Be sure you follow us and check that out. Until next time, please be safe out there. Enjoy a little break. You know, I'm gearing up to do a little hunting, and I might even get to do a little fishing for a change. We'll see. But until next time, I'm your host, Bryan Reynolds, for Mr. Rick Bass, MAI. Happy appraising.
The Appraisal Update podcast is brought to you by Appraiser eLearning.